All righty, welcome to another Wednesday evening. Here we are, November 19th of 2025, looking at Bible patterns in modern times. We'll be picking up with the late 1950s, in fact, 1959, going into the 60s. We'll get some scripture going. Let's start again in Genesis chapter 1. Get some scriptural thoughts before we dive into all of that. Let's see. Screen share. Let me share. See, what do I got here? Let's see. I don't know how to describe it, but 72 degrees with the heat on and 72 degrees with the AC on are two totally different temperatures. Oops, I think that was written by Brother Clay. Let's see. No, let's see. That's not the lesson plan. Let's see here. Try this again. Stop share. Let's try share in that one. There we are. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Let's look at verses. Pull this up. On day 6, the day of man, let's look at verses 26 and 27. Refresh that. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. We are told, as Moses records, Genesis 1, 26, we're told this. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every crawling thing that crawls on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So we looked at some thoughts with that last week, and I wanted to pick up where we had left off and go to some further thoughts from there. Then we'll get into our regular study. So from Jonathan Cahn, Messianic Jewish Rabbi, his devotional book, Book of Mysteries, on this verse, he mentions this. We shared this thought last week. God, with Christ being crucified on Friday, the same day, the day 6, same day that man was created, here's a thought. God allowed himself to bear the image of man, that man might again be allowed to bear the image of God. God allowed himself to bear the image of fallen man, that man might bear the image of the risen God. For God bore your image in his death, that you in your life could bear the image of God. So we started in the garden with Adam and Eve as image bearers of God, and that is our call and our job to go out in the world and be bearers of that image. But the image is a bit faulty because of our sin infection. So Christ came on, he went to that cross on that Friday to take our place. So God took on the form of man, so that with Christ taking that for us and removing that from us as we come to him, we can again bear the image of God free from sin, just like we were in the garden. So I thought that was a pretty cool deal there. So next thought we have, let's see, on the same passage here. Let's see what we think about this. Now, the Hebrew days, the days, starting from Genesis on, we know that for them, that the day starts in the evening, it goes from sunset to sunset, instead of us being in the midnight to midnight thing. So here's a thought with the Friday of Christ. So that Friday for them actually began that prior evening, that prior sunset, Friday Eve, which would be Thursday night, began at sunset with the Passover and the Lamb. And so Jesus was laid in the tomb on Friday evening. The sun set over Jerusalem and the day was finished. It all took place in that exact time period from sunset to sunset. So the day man was created, sixth day. Sixth day was Friday. The sixth day begins on Thursday night at sundown, ends Friday night at sundown. From sundown to sundown, sixth day. So it all had to begin at sunset and last until the following sunset. He accomplished it all on the sixth day, the day of man. He died for the sins of man, the guilt of man, the fall of man. did it all on the day of man to accomplish the redemption of man. It was on the sixth day as well that man was first given life. So now in Messiah, the children of man can again be given life and again find life as in the beginning on the sixth day. So we have life again on that sixth day thanks to Jesus. So thought that was pretty cool. Any thoughts, reactions to any of that? I thought that was a good opener for scripture to get us going here. So with our study on Bible patterns in modern times, specifically looking at Jonathan Cahn's latest book, The Avatar, The Return of the Ancients and the Future of America. Now we'll share the screen here. Let's see. Yeah, please.
We talked about it last time when us in our image.
Yeah.
And of course, 26 starts out that way. Let us.
Yes.
And 27, it just says God created 9 years.
Uh-huh.
So singular.
Yep.
Why is that?
They're all true because
They're all true.
they're all true.
Oh,
Of course, yeah. Because again, God and you have to look at the different translations of God. Where we see God, it's either like Elohim or Yahweh or different things like that. Adonai. So it depends on the actual Hebrew in there. But we see like we talked before, Elohim is actually plural. Right? The very first verse of scripture is God plural. And so God in his plurality, he's singular and plural at the same time, again, beyond our finite comprehension. We cannot, in words, accurately describe and contain him. So that's kind of what we're seeing. So he can be both singular and plural at the same time. So yeah, so it's fascinating stuff. So I appreciate that very much. So we left off January of 1959 with Castro and Cuba and Santeria and the which again is the false worship where they have the from the Spaniards in Cuba, they have the Catholic saints on the face value, but with the slaves exported from Africa, they're actually worshiping their African gods under the guise of the Catholic saints. And so this Santeria religion is very prominent. And we saw last time how Castro and his guerrilla fighters were very much invoking and wearing the amulets of the Santerian gods. And in fact, the god here, we see Ocean here with the famous for the doves. We see that Castro was coronated here by these doves, apparently. And in fact, we were told, ended with this last week, the priests of Santeria declare that Castro had been chosen by the gods and they would stand behind him. That's what having those doves on him signified there. So moving on from here, we'll see that Ocean is not the only Santerian god associated with Castro and with what's happening in Cuba. And again, when we use the word God here in this context, understand first and foremost, lowercase g. Secondly, man-made idols that are being acted upon by very real spiritual demons. So that's what we're dealing with here. So we've got, let's see that, the doves. We've got this other Santerian god here, Chango. So let's see the connection with Cuba and Castro and Chango here. So Chango is one of the most powerful and popular gods in the Santerian pantheon. In Santerian mythology, Chango was a warrior god, known for his many battles, military campaigns, celebrated symbol of masculinity, virility, risk taker, strong, courageous. At the same time, volatile, temperamental, violent, murderous. So similarly, starting with the first uprising against Batista, Castro took on the role of warrior, became known throughout Cuba for his military campaigns, battles, symbol of masculinity, virility, risk taker, strong, courageous on one hand, volatile, temperamental, murderous on the other. So Castro's personality, very similar to the false god here, Chango from Santeria. Another thought here. While Chango was in battle, his brother Ajaka was on the throne as king. But Ajaka lost the support of the people. He got removed from power. So some say it was even Shango that overthrew him. So Shango then takes the throne and reigns in his place. So Castro likewise engaged in battle as a guerrilla fighter when Batista was ruling the nation. So Batista lost the support of the people, would fall from power, and Castro overthrew him. So he would then rule in Batista's place, just like Shango became a ruler. Another thing about Shango, he's associated with the color red, typically depicted as arrayed in red garments, as his worshippers typically dress in red to honor him. So Castro was associated with the color red, saturated the island in red. Red flags, red banners hanging from the flagpoles and buildings, posters and paintings that bore Castro's image across the nation, typically highlighted or washed in red. Don't worry, an angel just got its wings. That's all. Shango, said to have ruled his kingdom with an iron fist. Powerful, violent leader, tyrant, feared for his tyrannical ways, given to vengeance, showed no reluctance in putting his enemies to death, a despot. Well, Castro ruled Cuba with an iron fist. Powerful, violent leader, feared for his tyrannical ways, vengeful, showed no hesitation in imprisoning and executing his enemies, ruled as a dictator. So very much in keeping here. Get this about Shango. Among the objects associated with Shango is the cigar. His worshippers would place cigars on his altars as offerings in the hope of procuring his favor. So we might then expect that the cigar would be uniquely associated with Fidel Castro. Of course, it is. In fact, no major world leader in the late 20th century had become so uniquely associated with the cigar as Fidel Castro. So strong was the association. The American CIA came up with more than one plot to assassinate him by means of a deadly cigar. Straight up. And as far as assassination attempts went, in the mythology of Shango, the god was famous for escaping the prospect of death. So too is Castro. Last thought here. Go to the next one here. So that's Shango. Here's Ocean again. So Shango is especially associated with the goddess Ocean. Castro was actually said to have been wearing a metal amulet around his neck. The amulet bore the image of the Lady of El Cobre, behind which was the goddess Ocean. So remember, Castro had started in 1953 with the raid on the barracks, the Moncado barracks, and got captured. And later in the 1950s, his mom went to the church there at El Codra and put a little golden miniature figurine of a guerrilla warrior there at the altar there, praying for her son, Fidel Castro, to the Santerian gods there at that church there. So, and then now Castro has his success here. So we see all that happening. So bottom line, moral of the story here, moral is the appropriate word here. Let's see. When the post-Christian dictator Fidel Castro warred against God and his people on the island of Cuba, he did so while unwittingly mimicking the Santerian god Shango. And so when we talk about avatars, when we talk about these demons who are using people for their own benefit and the kind of passing along their own personalities, we see that playing out right here. Any thoughts, reactions on Castro and the Santerian gods here? All good. Yeah.
So what I forgot the name of the one that Castro was emulating.
This one here, was Shango, then Ocean?
Shango.
Yeah, Shango.
Was that at one time a real person?
Not that I'm aware of. I could be wrong.
So it was made up.
Mhm. Yeah. What we do know for sure is that these were all false gods that demons were taking advantage of that came over from Africa to Cuba with the slaves here. But if these were mythologies like Greek mythology, a lot of that is based on real human beings that just got expounded upon. It could be, I can't rule that out, that there may have been a human initial source.
Verse,
Mhm.
so that made me think, was it maybe it was a real person one time by that name, and when he finally met his demise, they
It's possible.
maybe got, yeah.
I can't rule that out. Yeah. So Clay is thinking that sounds like there might be a human source for this characterization of the Santeria god Shango, and that's quite possible. We'll have to, you know, that could be traced back out. See. So what happens from here now that Cuba is here in Castro's here in Cuba? Well, as mentioned in prior series, the Josiah Manifesto, a young boy named Felix, his family here in Camagüey, when Castro takes over, the family takes the young child and they bail from Cuba. Felix would grow up to be a part of Jonathan Cahn's church ministry at Beth Israel in Wayne, Indiana, be his Spanish translator. And so that was when he was leaving Cuba. See what else we got. So here's the thing, talking about mentioned earlier, post-Christian. Post, of course, meaning after. So after Christian. So with the Spaniards, Cuba was Catholic Christian. And so now with Castro coming in, that's completely changed here. But then we have the Santerian influence. So how's this going to play out? So here's what happened. With Castro's embrace of Marxism, Cuba became officially atheist, an atheistic state. So Christians and clergy were persecuted. Churches were cut off from access to media and from influencing the larger culture. See, that's really why socialism, communism, all of these various versions of socialism, fascism, they all are atheistic because they can't stand competition. They can't have a religion, they can't have any God that gets more allegiance. So it's all got to be about the state. It's all got to be about the government. So Christians are persecuted, churches are cut off from access to media, from influencing the larger culture, church schools are shut down. Marxism replaced Christianity as the nation's official creed and dogma. Priests and pastors arrested, sent to prison. Okay, so what about Santeria? Santeria was likewise deemed a religion, so the government at first discouraged and suppressed its practice. One could not openly engage in Santeria and be a member of the Cuban Communist Party. To hold a Santerian ceremony, practitioners had to receive government permits, at least officially. But Santeria continued to be practiced. In fact, the Cuban government increasingly saw Santeria as beneficial in promoting a unified Cuban identity. To that end, the government began sponsoring performances of Santerian dances and rites. Though we talked about these rites before, the toque de santo, the dance. Though one could view such things as folklore, the Santerian dances and rituals were designed to invoke the gods and summon the spirits. And so there's demonic possession involved with the Santerian dance stuff here. So what's the end result here? Okay, Christianity bad, but we're letting Santeria stuff happen. So instead of weakening the practice of Santeria, Castro's regime ended up empowering it. In the spiritual realm, think about this. This is Jonathan Cahn's thought here. The power of Jesus was the antidote to the Santerian spirits and gods. But the government's relentless war against the gospel would largely remove that antidote, along with its restraining force from Cuban culture. At the same time, the absence of the gospel would create a spiritual void that Marxism was unable to fill. See, they want to be your daddy, they want to be everything, they want to be your God, they want to be everything, but they can't. because even when they remove God, communism is incapable of satisfying that spiritual need. Huh. The government then, to promote the Santerian religion and the Cuban identity and unity, the government even began broadcasting Santerian ceremonies on national television. Result that over time, the majority of those on the island would take part in Santerian practices in one form or another. If they're not physically present doing them, they're watching them on TV. They're being fed these on the tube. So here's Duncan Collins' observation. We'll talk about this here. So this is the irony. Castro had removed God from Cuban culture, but he could not remove the need for God's presence. And so instead of eliminating spiritual hunger, it increased it. And in closing the door to God's presence, it opened the door to the gods and spirits. And in Cuba, they were already there, waiting and well prepared to fill the void. So what do y'all think of that? What's that, Sister Leslie?
Okay.
Huh, yeah.
You know, I thought in my head is, the government can come in and revisit their,
Right.
and, you can't do this anymore. They'll take all on you.
Amen, brother.
So
Great
the
point.
Individual, and they can,
Huge point.
and just like I said, they broadcast on TV where it's going on and on. Now,
Amen, brother.
But forcing you to believe,
Right.
so.
Brother Clay just made a hugely profound spiritual point, and I'm so glad he did. And basically, I'll paraphrase and make sure I get you right here. Okay, the government can officially close down buildings, church buildings. The government can officially not allow formal gatherings. The government can try to push, like the Santeria stuff on the TV, which you can. It's got an on-off switch, as Brother Clay says. What the government can't do is change your heart. And so Brother Clay's beautiful, profound point is that we don't have to, because we know the way the world is going. We know the things, we know the little sneak peek we got of it with COVID. Government can try from their end, but we don't have to let anything the government can take away. We don't have to let them take the things that by right they really can't take. They can take all the external stuff, but if we have our faith within us, that can't be touched. Nothing they can physically take away or deprive us of can stop our faith. And in fact, oftentimes when we're removed of all the bubbles, then our faith is oftentimes more genuine, and because it has to be. And so the flip side of that is to make sure, while we're enjoying Brother Cooper's masterful use of technology here, and I'm still figuring things out, and all the razzle dazzle stuff, hopefully this is all help bringing things to life and to light for us. If there isn't a spiritual foundation to us and to what we're talking about here, then it's all for nothing. The last thing we want is all sorts of ooh and ah stuff on the surface with no substance underneath it, because all that can go, just as the government took it all away in Cuba. So our faith is never to be in the external things, always to be in the matters of the heart. And so the external things can flow from that. The external things can be a tool in support of that, but they are never to replace that. So I'm so glad you said that, Brother Clay. That really hit me. I'm really grateful for that. Any other reactions, thoughts on this stuff? Well, moving right along through the 50s here. By the way, all this is happening in a Sabbath year. In fact, the Sabbath year, before we get to that, the Sabbath year closed. The Fatah, this is from the Dragon's Prophecy. So we covered this recently. 1959, Yasser Arafat, by the way, he's famous for the Palestinian stuff, right? He was born in Egypt, so not Palestine. Anyway, Yasser Arafat in 1959 starts this faction called Fatah, which is an acronym, just like Hamas is an acronym. And the acronym stands for the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, which would, and as we know, the PLO would, come off from that. But here in 1959, he starts the Fatah, which is that. Something like that. Hela Mara, Hela Fata. Yeah. I'm here at Camp Granada. Well, the food here is improving. The black things in it are not moving. Yes. So anyway, the Shemitah, the Sabbath year, ends with a solar eclipse. And so that brings to the end to that year, Friday, October 2nd of 1959 is that eclipse. So let's see, what else? That now brings us into the 60s. So let's see here. Yeah, we'll come to that in a moment. So bringing us into the 60s, we have a couple thoughts bringing it home to America. Let's see here. Let's go in our Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12. Look at a couple of verses here. What we'll be seeing here is when Solomon died and his son Rehoboam became king in his place, David's grandson. The kingdom split under his reign, as we knew that it would. And so Jeroboam the first, he took 10 tribes of the north, and they became the nation of Israel. Rehoboam was left in the south with the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and they became the nation of Judah, with Jerusalem as the capital and still on the throne of David there. So we'll see what happens with this new nation of Israel, 10 tribes in the north under Jeroboam. Let's see again, 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12. This gives you an idea of how Israel started. You've seen me, heard me mention through the devotional series going across the Bible that after the split, the nation of Israel in the north never had a good king. Jeroboam the second was the closest with some of the things he did. Jehu did some good things, but then had a bad end. And world Judah, they have sometimes a good king, sometimes a bad king, and good or bad being defined as godly or ungodly. So here in 1 Kings chapter 12, let's pick up in verse 25. So here's the king of this breakaway nation of Israel. What does he do? 1 Kings 12:25. Then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. Went out from there, built Penuel. Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David. If this people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will return to their Lord, to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So the king consulted, and he made 2 golden calves, because those always work out well, right? He made 2 golden calves, and he said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. And he set up one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And he made houses on the high places and appointed priests from all the people who were not of the sons of Levi. We just saw the whole Korah's rebellion thing in Sunday school. Yeah. 32. Jeroboam also instituted a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like the feast that is in Judah, and went up to the altar. So basically, don't worry about that Feast of Tabernacles down there. Just stay up here. We'll have our own feast. So he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves which he had made. And he stationed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. Then he went up to the altar which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day in the 8th month, a month that he had devised in his own heart. And he instituted a feast for the sons of Israel and went up to the altar to burn incense. So if you wonder why things didn't work out for the nation of Israel, that's how it started. Yeah. What's that?
One golden calf didn't work in the desert, why would we figure 2 of them?
Beautiful, Brother Clay. He says, if one golden calf didn't work in the desert, why did he think 2 would? Yeah, you know. So what's the point here? So the nation's first king, Jeroboam, set it all in motion when he erected two golden calves for his people to worship. And it all went downhill from there. So that was a turning point for the Lord's people there. What was a turning point for America? I'll refresh this. We've gone over it before, but I'll refresh it. June 25th, 1962, Supreme Court case of Engel versus Vitale. This is when the Bible was banned in school, prayer banned in school. That was all that. What we're seeing here is a photocopy of a page from my Founders Bible, where it shows, here's a timeline. This is a chart of SAT, total scores. So here's the score, here are the years. 1954, 58, 1962, 65, 70, 74, so on down up to 1994. So these are SAT scores. Here in 1962 is when that Supreme Court ruling was passed. And here are the SAT scores afterwards. What's that?
What's the score
Yeah.
mean?
The score is how well, it's a test, the SAT score. It's a test you take for a college entrance exam.
Yeah. Okay, the SATs went.
Yeah, SATs, yeah. So yeah. So yeah, I actually went to high school, someone who got a perfect score on the math section. A friend of mine did from high school. Yeah. Yeah. Aptitude, scholastic aptitude test, I believe it is. Yeah. 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 So again, how many coincidences are we gonna see as we go here before we go? No, maybe not so much a coincidence. So here's the thought from the Avatar. It was in the 1960s, a link comparing this with the two calves, the departure from God, removing God from the equation. It was in the 1960s that America's departure from God would become unmistakably evident. At the beginning of the decade, the nation began removing God from its public life, starting with the banning of prayer in its public school system. Though at the time, the ruling appeared to be of limited context, it would set in motion a metamorphosis that would touch every realm of American culture and would, over time, intensify, deepen, and gain increasing momentum and critical mass. We say we've seen that? Yeah. So, Brother Clay, Sister Carolyn, I know this is going back a ways, but as far as like Castro on Cuba and the Supreme Court ruling, any kind of memories or thoughts from that time frame? Yeah. Yeah, remember Castro? Yeah, sure. Bad guy. Yeah. Right on. I got you. No, sure.
Yeah, being in the seventh grade, and I confused two people.
Uh-huh.
I did a dumb kid.
Yeah.
I think Martin Luther King, was the year he was assassinated.
68.
Okay. Okay, I was in eighth grade, but my seventh grade teacher was anyway. I was thinking, instead, I heard somebody announced it, and I was thinking Fidel Castro.
Ah.
So I do this, like that, and boy, she just perked up.
Oh.
Who's that girl? And
So as a kid in school, you misunderstood. We heard Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. You thought it was Castro that had been assassinated, and so you had a different reaction than the other kids did then. As well, Sister Diana, you were going to share something. Yeah.
What year was that?
78, 78, 79.
And then that little thing, kind of goes up just a little bit, that's the plateau. Now, what year is that plateau?
These are the Reagan years. This is 82, 86, then we go down to 90.
Yes. so great, yeah, great education I got.
I know I can't take an SAT. When there's a P up there.
Yeah, the preset, yeah.
But don't all, you know, and what is the score? Of some, or the test that was in around 1600,
1600 is a perfect score.
that's the perfect score, well, they were doing.
No, they weren't. Yeah, they're two sections. Each section is 800 points, and my friend, he got 800 out of 800 on the math. And so 800 on math and then 800 on the English and everything else. Yeah. No, he just got a perfect score on the math. Yeah, he didn't get a 1600. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I remember learning about Castro in school and where we moved in Rolling Heights.
Yeah.
I remember after I was a little older and built there, they built a missile silo.
The missile silos
Up in, they built it there in Rolling Heights. They had taken them out.
in Rolling Heights. How about that?
Yeah, and yeah, you know that? Oh, yeah, because the kids were always running around up there and people pulling it, but they had a missile base up there up in the hills, yeah.
How about
You
that?
bought that, those lines, I think,
No, they're there. They're there.
Let's see it. So,
I was in Dakota,
yeah,
I did not realize that that whole state was under the underground.
right.
At that time,
But
they go, why, who would want, you know, in my head, I go, who would wanna be attacking North Dakota of all places, you know, but it's because they had so much of nothing, they could enter underground.
yeah.
NORAD.
Move
Stuff too,
from one
yeah.
place to another underground and
Yeah.
not be detected.
Let's play global thermonuclear war. Matthew Broderick, War Games.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we see this happening, so again, the spirits behind the scenes. First, one on the scene in the unholy trinity with Baal, Ishtar, Inanna, and Moloch. First one, Baal. So the early 60s marked a critical milestone. The spirit of Baal began penetrating American culture, causing it to drive God out of its national life, out of its schools, out of its public squares, out of its culture, out of its life. As the spirit of Baal had done to ancient Israel, so it likewise caused America to forget its God, to overturn his ways and precepts, and blur the lines between truth and subjectivity, which means it's up to you, it's up to me, whatever. Yeah, or truth is truth. Baal, moved America from God, capital G, to the gods, lowercase, and from biblical faith to post-Christian neo-paganism. Yeah, rightfully oof. So I'm amazed at this concept of neo-paganism. This whole idea of progressivism, for example, progress sounds good. Pilgrim's Progress, right? Progress is a good thing. But this progressivism mindset is progressing away. They're more focused on what they're progressing away from. What are they progressing away from? Away from the Bible, away from the Judeo-Christian God, away from the biblical founding of our nation. That's the old stuff. We're progressing away. And it's funny because, as Jonathan Kahn points out, Christ and the spread of Christ throughout the Western world, the embrace of Christ throughout the Western world, even though we know the problems with state religion, be that as it may, the embrace of Christ in the West was a mass exorcism of the pagan false gods and demons. And so the problem is what we have now, where I'm going with this, is this idea of neo-paganism, neo meaning new, but it's the new old stuff. It's like bell-bottom jeans coming back in style. It's like you've got, okay, we've been here before. This is everything that Christ banished for us. And you're not moving ahead in, leaving Christ behind. You're not advancing. You're regressing to what was there before Christ. And it's always worse second time around. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we see happening here.
Yeah, what about neo?
Yeah.
You said new.
Neo means new, like Neolithic is New Stone Age.
Yeah, well, as a thing came to mind when you said neo-paganism,
Yeah,
it was neo-Nazi.
new Nazis,
Yeah.
neo-Nazis.
Right, neo.
Yeah, since the old ones are dead, those who are doing it now, they're neo-Nazis. Yeah, they're the new, yeah. Which I remember at my brother's wedding, talking with some of the groomsmen as we were getting ready, getting our, boutonnieres, whatever on, someone said something about right-wing Nazis, and I refrained myself from saying anything because I was just didn't want to. But my immediate in my mind thought, "Oh, you poor product of a public school education." Because everything about the Nazis was socialism and anti-God. There's nothing right about it. And oh, no question. And so social, not Nazi, National Socialist is it's right there in the name. Yeah. Don't know many right-wing socialists. If they do, they need some help in getting some things cleared up. So, some further thoughts on this. So, mentioned missiles and Cuba. So, this Santerian influence, how far do we think it's going to affect things that play out? So, if Castro is allowing himself to be affected, whether he realizes it or not, by these Santerian false gods, these demons, Shango and these others, how far is he going to be driven? Here's a thought from Jonathan Cahn. An individual possessed by a spirit will become darkened and will live a life characterized by oppression, bent towards death, destruction, even self-destruction. And I'll pause right there. This is important because Satan and the demons do not care about the people they use. They will use them up and then cast them out. So they're not being anyone's. So Satan is no one's friend. So if you think, you're mad at Christ because he didn't go your way, so you're going to buddy up with the devil, he's going to use you and spit you out. So he doesn't care. If he causes you to self-destruct, it's another victory for him because you're still made in God's image. So someone affected by a spirit, darkened, oppression, bent towards death, destruction, even self-destruction, and war against God's presence. Okay. So life on the island of Cuba became darkened, characterized by oppression, became bent towards self-destruction, even to the point it almost brought the entire world to the edge of nuclear destruction. So too, it warred against God and his people. Beyond this, the gods demanded sacrifices of blood, even human sacrifice. The Castro regime would oblige them. It was not long after coming to power, Cuba's revolutionary government proved itself adept at shedding blood as it inaugurated an era of executions. Anyone deemed an enemy of the state could be imprisoned and killed. The Orishas now had their blood sacrifices brought to their altars by their new Marxist priests. In that sense, the atheistic Marxist government of Cuba became itself an avatar of the gods. So Castro and his regime doing this to all of Cuba, Cuba itself taking all this on, Cuba became an avatar of the Santerian gods to this point of violence and death and destruction. So pretty significant there. Now, check this out. Again, how far is Chango going to take Castro here? Chango was believed to possess terrifying powers of destruction, master the secret of fire, employed it against his adversaries. Indeed, he was the god of lightning and thunder, utilized them as weapons. He sent down lightning from the skies to strike down his enemies. He learned the magical use of thunderstones to bring destruction on earth. According to the mystery of Chango, might expect Castro to likewise acquire terrifying powers of destruction. And so he would. It happened as he worked with the Soviet Union to place nuclear missiles in Cuba aimed at the United States. The act would trigger the Cuban Missile Crisis, and perhaps the most dangerous moment in history up to that point. As with Chango, Castro acquired the power to send objects through the sky to bring fire and destruction upon the earth. As Chango sent down fire from the skies to bring destruction to his enemies, so Castro sought to compel the Soviet Union to launch a preemptive nuclear strike. It was all there in the Hebrew word used in the Bible to describe the gods. In the Hebrew, the word shadim, derived from a word that means to destroy. That's what their whole intention is. So Santerian influence, let's get that. So yeah, here's little idol of Baal here. It's taking a while to load. We can move on from that. So the Cuban Missile Crisis, check this out. This is the range of the weapons on Cuba. So you can see why there was concern. Kennedy, yep. 1962. The October Missile Crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, yep. October 16th, 1962. So check this out. This is a U.S. Navy P-2H Neptune flying over a Soviet cargo ship here at Cuba. Yeah, so that's during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that's kind of significant.
What did Cuba have to offer Russia?
90 miles from America.
Oh, Russia just wanted to get it.
Are you close?
Yep. So let's see, that is actually a good place to wind down. So you mean to tell me that Santeria gods could very well have had an imp, and the demons behind them could very well have played a key part in driving and inciting the Cuban Missile Crisis? Yeah. By the way, sweetie, Sister Ashley, show we've been watching, we mentioned that recent episode had a reference to Santeria. The show is also taking place and leading up to the timing of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah. So on that note, let's close our evening back in Scripture. Let's go back to Genesis again. This time, 23. Yeah, let's refresh those verses. Genesis 1. Let's go 27 to 29. Genesis 1, 27, 29. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Let's go ahead and stop the share here. The image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Then God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you. We can stop there. So here's the thought. So Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden and were given dominion over the garden, over the animal kingdom, and all that stuff. Jesus was buried in the garden tomb, where obviously with Jesus' resurrection, there was life after his death. There was the resurrection. So life begins in a garden by rising up from the earth. So the Messiah rose from the grave, rose from the earth. What rises in the garden is what had first descended into the earth, the seed. Messiah likened his death to a seed. He said, unless a seed falls to the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. So the seed of Messiah's life, buried in the garden tomb, bore life and rose. So it's an ongoing work, just as the Garden of Eden was to be. Whatever's brought into this garden, whatever's planted in the garden tomb will bear a miracle. Whatever you plant here, your past, your broken dreams, your old life, your failures, your losses, your tears, whatever you let go of here, your treasures, your life, whatever it is you plant in this garden will come alive again and blossom, bring forth life. a miracle more beautiful than what you planted. For this tomb is now the garden of God, the ground of miracles. So where things are buried and die in God, when we bury ourselves in God and when we bury our things in Christ, he takes that death, that separation, and he breathes life into it. And up from that becomes a life that was better than anything that could have been before. So I thought it was a pretty spiffy thought. Closing on this last one here, and then we'll call it a night. So the creation never brought forth the life it was meant to bear until the gardener came into the garden. He came into the garden so that it would bear fruit. God came into his creation so that creation might bring forth life. When the creation bore the first fruits of new life, when he first appeared outside the tomb, what form did Jesus appear in? What was he mistaken for? A gardener. And what kind of a tomb was it bearing those first fruits? It was a garden tomb. He's the gardener, we're the garden. So, moral of that story, let the gardener come into his garden. Let him till its soil, sow its seed, bring forth new life. Every garden touched by the gardener will bear the fruit it was meant to bear. I thought that was pretty spiffy. Cool. On that note, any other thoughts, reactions, comments, questions from either this look again at Genesis 1 or anything we've looked at from 1959 to 1962? All good? Please. Yes.
It is now always so often the case. Be given a false name.
Yes.
Or you can see.
Absolutely. Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Because if he just said, hi, I'm Satan and I want to mess you up and to take down others, I want to use you to take down others, that's a hard sell. But if he says, you know what, you're a victim, you've been slighted, you just haven't been given your chance, and you know what, I'm your buddy, and like I said, Satan's no one's buddy. And so there you go. No, I appreciate you saying that very much. So forces of evil, often being the liars and deceivers that they are, will not be honest in who they are and their agenda. And so too, humankind, under whether it's not even necessarily demonic possession or influence in that sense, direct influence as far as possession, but maybe even just oppression or influence in the sense of drawing in different temptation directions, humans will find themselves lying to make things look better than they actually are. Will give things a false label to make it not sound so bad, compared to what's really the agenda there. And so that's why one of my all-time favorite words and concepts is integrity. And if I ever started a mission, I would want to name the church Integrity. Grace is a great name, don't get me wrong. I love grace, need grace. But what is integrity? What you see is what you get. What's on the outside is what's on the inside. That's it. That's how we're called to be. Cards on the table, plain and simple. And so that's how Christ is. That's how we're called to be. Beautiful stuff. So yeah, appreciate that very much, Sister Diana. Anything else from anyone? All right, enjoyed being with you. Appreciate the conversation and interaction. Let's go ahead and stand, meet in the center of the aisle. We'll go ahead and stop our recording here, and we'll close out in our season of prayer together.